The complete harmony of faith and reason, mysticism and science, thought and action is something that not everyone can manifest, for such harmony is not achieved merely through knowledge, but is the result of an inner journey, a deep experience, and a continuous striving within the human soul. Where reason shows the path, faith strengthens the heart. Mysticism draws the spirit toward truth, and science becomes a lamp that illuminates the way more clearly. Thought plants the seed of understanding in the mind, and action allows it to bear fruit in the soil of life. A person who can bring these four dimensions into balance within themselves is neither trapped in the rigidity of dry rationalism nor lost in baseless emotions. Their knowledge is not empty of spirituality, nor is their spirituality separated from awareness. Such a person manifests truth not only in thought, but in the very way they live. And it is this manifestation that transforms them into a more complete, conscious, and influential human being in the world. Have you ever asked yourself whether someone has ever been able to show the perfect harmony of faith and reason, mysticism and science, contemplation and action? In 1098, Hildegard of Bingen entered the world during one of the most turbulent periods of medieval history, when the established order struggled to balance spiritual authority with worldly power. From her earliest memories, Hildegard seemed to live simultaneously in two worlds. In her writings, Hildegard recounts that she often found herself surrounded by a living light, an experience that, she says, accompanied her from childhood until the time she recorded it in writing at the age of 70. Her visions were not gentle or merely comforting dreams. They were vast, cosmic experiences. She perceived the entire universe as a network of light, pulsing with inexhaustible energy, connecting the smallest plant, stone, or seed to the greatest planets and galaxies, and even to the highest ranks of angels. She witnessed many events before they occurred. She understood the hidden properties of plants and heard cosmic sounds like musical harmonies, melodies she would later attempt to record in writing. At the same time, she lived an ordinary life within the structures of medieval society. She was the 10th child in her family, and according to Catholic custom of the time, a 10th child was often dedicated to the service of God. Based on this belief, her family made a decision that would place her on what they believed to be her divine path. At the age of 8, they entrusted her to Jetta of Sponheim, a noblewoman who had chosen to withdraw from the world and live as a religious recluse devoted to God. For the next 30 years, Hildegard lived far from ordinary life. She resided in a small enclosed cell attached to a monastery, a place of near total seclusion. The cell had only a tiny window through which she could observe the religious services taking place in the church. For a child, such a life could have been painfully restrictive and lonely. Yet for Hildegard, this quiet space gradually became something different, a sanctuary where her inner life and visions could unfold. Under Judah's guidance, Hildegard began her education. From the age of 8, she learned Latin, studied the scriptures, and immersed herself in the rhythms of prayer and monastic discipline. Judah, though strict in her devotion, also served as Hildegard's first spiritual mentor, helping her interpret the unusual experiences she had been having since childhood. Slowly, Hildegard began to understand that her visions were not simply personal dreams or imaginings. She came to believe they were divine messages, insights meant not only for her own spiritual growth, but eventually to be shared with the wider world. By the time she reached adolescence, Hildegard had developed a remarkable ability to move between what she perceived as two realms, the visible world of everyday life and the invisible world revealed through her visions. She could participate in the ordinary routines of the monastery, study, prayer, and work, while at the same time experiencing profound inner revelations that she believed connected her to the deeper structure of creation itself. She could sit with distinguished scholars and theologians and engage in deep, passionate discussions, while at the same time receiving mysterious visions filled with messages from the hierarchy of angels. These visions offered her images of a cosmic order and secrets that could leave even the most learned university masters in awe. She could spend hours in solitude contemplating these profound mysteries, and yet still attend to the practical needs of daily life, answering letters, managing responsibilities both small and large, and maintaining her connection with the tangible world around her. But these visions demanded more than silence and passive contemplation. They were a call to action, a summons to seek answers and to confront truths that challenged not only her intellect, but also her very soul. Each vision seemed like a gateway to a reality beyond ordinary experience, a realm where meaning and truth existed beyond the limits of everyday language and logic. At the age of 38, she found herself responsible not only for her own spiritual growth, but also for guiding the souls of others. This responsibility filled her with fear, not because she doubted her ability to lead, but because she knew it would require her to reveal the visions she had long kept hidden. When Jutta died in 1136, the small community of religious women who had lived and prayed together for many years unanimously chose Hildegard as their new leader. At 38, she suddenly found herself in a position where she was responsible not only for the care of her own soul, but also for the spiritual direction and well-being of others. The weight of this responsibility was immense. It brought with it a profound awareness of the seriousness of her mission, and it frightened her deeply. Her fear did not arise from self-doubt, but from her understanding of what true leadership would demand. She knew that to guide others faithfully, she would have to reveal the mysterious visions and revelations she had experienced, messages that some people might reject, others might fear, and still others might mock. Every vision, every image, every moment of revelation she experienced now carried a new significance. They were no longer meant solely for her own inner growth, but for the guidance of a wider community. She would have to find the courage to speak about what she had seen and heard, even if doing so meant stepping beyond the safety and familiarity of her secluded life. Yet within her fear, she discovered a growing strength and determination. It was a strength rooted in the visions themselves and in her faith in the truth they revealed. That inner conviction would gradually lead her onto a path that was difficult and demanding, yet filled with purpose, a path that would transform her from a quiet woman of a small religious community into one of the most remarkable spiritual voices of medieval Europe. She saw the vast sweep of cosmic history laid out before her, as if the entire story of creation were an intricate tapestry she could read at a glance. She perceived the secret connections that bound together all created things, planets and plants, human souls and celestial beings, the smallest acts of life and the grand movements of the universe. Nothing was isolated. Everything resonated in harmony, and she could trace the hidden patterns that linked one part of existence to another. Alongside this extraordinary vision, she received precise and practical instructions, guidance that spanned both the spiritual and the earthly. She understood reforms needed within the Church, the delicate administration of ritual and discipline, and the moral guidance required to lead others. She also gained insight into the care of the human body, learning remedies, treatments, and practices to heal and preserve life. Every revelation was detailed and concrete, yet suffused with the sense of divine order and cosmic intelligence. In her mind, the mystical and the practical, the heavenly and the human, were inseparably intertwined, and she carried the weight of this knowledge with both awe and responsibility. But she had remained silent, fearing being dismissed as delusional or evil. But over time, Hildegard found a way to give form to the visions that stirred within her. She converted them into art, vivid illuminations, intricate patterns, and soaring music that could communicate what words alone could not. Every brushstroke, every note was a translation of her mystical experience into a tangible medium. Her paintings radiated the intricate structure of the cosmos she perceived, while her compositions, full of unusual harmonies and soaring melodies, seemed to echo the voice of the divine itself. Through this creative expression, she transformed her private revelations into a language that others could see, hear, and feel, bridging the gap between the ineffable and the everyday world. Hildegard explains in her writings that during her revelations, she perceived a kind of cosmic order and harmony, something like the music of heaven. This idea is close to the philosophical concept of music of the spheres, the notion that the universe and the stars possess a form of divine harmony. She tried to recreate this sense of order and radiance through long, soaring melodies. These pieces were sung by the nuns of her convent and were also part of her religious drama, Ordo Virtutum, a work considered one of the earliest moral musical plays in the history of Europe. For Hildegard, the process of creating music was roughly as follows: revelation, to cosmic image and sensation, to writing a mystical text, to composing a melody to express that experience. A turning point came in the year 1141, when Hildegard was 43 years old, and her life suddenly entered a decisive moment. In an extraordinarily vivid and intense vision, a pure and powerful light appeared before her, and a voice unlike any other, not merely heard, but profoundly felt, spoke to her through the brilliance.
Speak and write what has been shown to you.
The voice of the light continued.
Record what you see and hear. Speak it, teach it, and guide others, so that people may come to know their Creator through creation and its signs.
Yet Hildegard confronted the vision with fear and doubt, her heart heavy with anxiety.
I am nothing but a small, insignificant woman. I have not been educated in schools. I do not know the formal language of scholarship. How can I speak to bishops and kings? How can I convey such immense truths to those who wield power and knowledge? They will mock me. They will say I am insane.
The divine response, however, was both gentle and uncompromising, offering calm reassurance while radiating undeniable authority.
I, who am life itself, choose the weak things of this world to confound the strong. I select what is small and humble to shine forth the light of truth, and through you, to reveal to the world the one who has created you.
In that moment, Hildegard realized that this calling was not a burden imposed upon her, but a divine gift and a weighty responsibility. She was now required to face her fears, to find courage in the midst of doubt, a courage that would illuminate not only her own life, but the lives of countless others. This vision marked the beginning of a path that would carry her from the quiet, seemingly insignificant life of a woman in a small monastery to the role of spiritual leader and inspirational guide for the world. She was told,
"You will speak, for I will speak through you."
At first, Hildegard resisted this inner voice, refusing to let herself be carried away by any sense of pride or self-importance. When she continued to hesitate and doubt, her body reacted. She fell physically ill, a pattern that recurred every time she tried to resist the divine command. Gradually, the visions became more urgent, pressing her to confront her fear and surrender to the calling. Ultimately, she could no longer resist. She later recalled,
I was forced, under the intense pressure of pain, to reveal what I had seen. At last, with the lash of God, I fell upon my sickbed until I submitted and began to write.
The work she began would grow into a monumental theological treatise, one that blended mystical insight with practical instruction. Yet beyond the creation of a single book, Hildegard was discovering her true mission to be a messenger who would speak God's truth regardless of consequence. As news of her visions spread, she found herself at the center of intense controversy. Some hailed her as a new prophet, a divine messenger for the age. Others condemned her as a dangerous heretic, suspicious of a woman who claimed direct communication with God. Church authorities examined her writings with meticulous care and curiosity, weighing every word and image to determine whether it aligned with official doctrine. Rulers and nobles sought her counsel, hoping for guidance that was both spiritual and practical. Scholars at universities and monasteries debated the authenticity of her revelations, each judging them through the lens of their own expertise and tradition. Despite the scrutiny, Hildegard's voice persisted, bold, authoritative, and rooted in a vision she believed came directly from the divine. But Hildegard had learned to distinguish between human opinion and divine command. She understood that the truth revealed to her was independent of whether others comprehended or accepted it. With unwavering courage and faith, she spoke what had been shown to her, regardless of whether the world around her believed her or not. The voice that had remained silent for 43 years was now ready to shake the foundations of tradition, power, and knowledge in medieval Europe. Every letter she wrote, every treatise she composed, and every sermon she delivered carried the resonance of living light, echoing from her small convent into the heart of the complex struggles of politics and religion. Her statements revealed a strength and steadfastness that arose from absolute certainty and direct experience of the divine light. Calmly and confidently she declared,
I have received this vision from no human being, but from the serene, higher light that comes from God. If you resist what God commands, you do not resist me, but the one who sent me.
Her words not only shook doubts to their core, but also made it clear that the source of her inspiration was beyond human reason or formal learning. How did Hildegard prove that the voice she heard was of divine origin? When debate and argument reached no resolution, Hildegard employed a remarkable strategy. She enacted what could be called her signature of commitment, a bold, undeniable declaration that she was prepared to risk a body and life to demonstrate the divine command. She fell gravely ill and remained bedridden until the opposition relented, refusing to act otherwise. She spoke plainly.
I cannot rise from this bed unless you permit what God has commanded.
Her silence and steadfastness displayed the power of her faith and her direct connection to divine revelation, leaving no ambiguity about the source of her visions. This prolonged standoff continued for months, but eventually justice and careful examination prevailed. Archbishop Henry of Mainz, after studying and evaluating Hildegard's writings and visions, declared that her prophecies and insights bore clear signs of divine origin. With this official acknowledgement, doubts and suspicions were dispelled, and Hildegard was able to continue her mission with formal recognition and authority. This moment was not merely proof of her visions. It was a testament to the power of faith, the strength of perseverance, and her complete alignment with divine command, demonstrating to all the extraordinary certainty and courage that defined her life and work. In 1150, with papal approval and the support of local nobles, Hildegard led her community to Rupertsberg. There, despite having no formal training in architecture, she took on the design and oversight of the monastery's construction. She introduced innovations far ahead of her time, such as running water, advanced heating systems, and acoustically thoughtful designs that enhanced both speech and musical performance within space. Rupertsberg became more than a monastery. It grew into a center of learning where reflective spirituality was combined with practical knowledge. Hildegard established workshops for manuscript production, laboratories for herbal medicine, and scriptoriums, spaces for illuminating and copying texts, where her visions were transformed into radiant, exquisitely beautiful writings. Yet her most revolutionary work was still unfolding. While overseeing the construction of her monastery, she simultaneously composed writings that would establish her as one of the foremost intellectual figures of the Middle Ages. Her visions revealed not only profound spiritual truths, but also offered practical knowledge about the natural world. Through them, Hildegard gained a deep understanding of medicine, natural sciences, and the hidden connections linking all created beings. In her perspective, the universe was a living, interconnected network in which humans, nature, and divine forces existed in delicate and meaningful relationships. Every plant, every stone, and every living creature carried a unique power and purpose within the grand order of creation. These insights reflected a revolutionary approach to medicine in her time, one that combined careful observation of nature with mystical insight and spiritual inspiration. Hildegard regarded nature not merely as a source of medicinal substances, but as a language of divine wisdom to be carefully read and understood. She believed that illness was not simply a disorder of the body, but a disruption of the balance between body, spirit, and the natural order of the world. Accordingly, healing required restoring this lost harmony. In her writings, Hildegard described the medicinal properties of hundreds of plants, minerals, and animal substances. She explained their effects on the human body, methods for preparing herbal remedies, and even the role of diet and lifestyle in maintaining health. Some of this knowledge came from careful study and direct observation of the natural world, but a large portion, she believed, was revealed to her through visions and divine inspiration. Insight into the hidden virtues that God had placed within creation. In this way, Hildegard's works built a bridge between mysticism and natural science. She sought to demonstrate that understanding nature was in essence a path to understanding its creator. Each plant, stone, and living creature bore within it a sign of divine wisdom, capable of illuminating the human spirit while simultaneously restoring the body. Her medicine was thus holistic, intertwining spiritual, intellectual, and practical dimensions into a unified vision of health and creation. All nature, she wrote, exists in service of humankind, and within every element of creation lies a power intended to sustain human health and wholeness. To Hildegard, the natural world was not a collection of random materials, but a living system infused with divine purpose. Plants, stones, animals, water, and even the qualities of air and climate carried hidden virtues placed there by the Creator. If people learned to understand these gifts properly, they could restore balance to the body and harmony to the soul. Nature, in her view, was both a pharmacy and a teacher, revealing through its forms the wisdom necessary for healing. Her medical writings were unlike anything produced by most of her contemporaries. In an age when many physicians depended heavily on ancient Greek and Roman authorities, repeating inherited knowledge from figures such as classical medical writers, Hildegard approached healing in a different way. She carefully observed the effects of plants, foods, and minerals on the human body, but she also believed that true understanding required perceiving the deeper spiritual energies that animated them. For her, every natural substance possessed a particular vitality, what she often described as a life force embedded in creation. Effective healing came from recognizing how these energies interacted with the human body. Hildegard believed that illness arose when the natural harmony of the body was disturbed. Physical disease, emotional distress, and spiritual imbalance were closely connected. When the inner equilibrium of a person was disrupted through poor diet, excessive habits, emotional turmoil, or moral disorder, the body's natural vitality weakened and sickness could take root. Healing, therefore, required more than a simple remedy. It demanded the restoration of balance between body, mind, and spirit. Her medical practice became notably successful, and her reputation as a healer spread widely. Patients traveled long distances from across Europe seeking her guidance. Those who came to her did not receive only a single treatment or potion. Instead, Hildegard offered a holistic approach, carefully prepared herbal remedies, recommendations about food and nutrition, changes in daily habits and lifestyle, and spiritual counsel intended to restore inner peace. She believed that the most effective medicine worked simultaneously on the body and the soul, helping a person return to the natural harmony that God had intended for human life. She understood that healing the body required careful attention to the condition of the soul. For Hildegard, illness was never purely physical. The state of a person's spirit, his or her emotions, habits, thoughts, and relationship with the divine deeply influenced the health of the body. Anxiety, anger, despair, and spiritual emptiness could weaken the natural vitality of a person, while faith, balance, and inner peace could strengthen it. True healing, therefore, meant restoring harmony on every level of human existence. A remedy for the body had to be accompanied by guidance for the heart and spirit, because only when these dimensions were aligned could lasting health be achieved. Perhaps her most revolutionary insight was her recognition that women's health required approaches different from those used for men. In an era when most medical knowledge was based almost entirely on the male body, and when women's experiences were often misunderstood or ignored, Hildegard devoted careful attention to the unique realities of female physiology. She studied the rhythms of the female body, the processes of conception and childbirth, and the physical and emotional challenges faced by women throughout their lives. Her writings describe reproductive health, fertility, pregnancy, and the effects of hormonal and bodily cycles with a degree of sensitivity and detail that was rare in medieval medicine. Rather than viewing women as weaker or incomplete versions of men, a common belief in medieval medical theory, Hildegard saw the female body as possessing its own strength, wisdom, and creative power. She understood that women's health could not be treated simply by applying the same methods used for men. Instead, it required knowledge of the distinctive balance, energies, and rhythms present in the female body.
Woman is the fullness of fruition. She contains within herself the power to create not only physical life, but also spiritual renewal.
In her understanding, womanhood embodied a profound generative force, the capacity to nurture life, to sustain it, and to participate in the mystery of creation reflected something sacred within the order of the world itself. Through these insights and writings, Hildegard came to be regarded as a kind of universal physician, someone whose understanding extended far beyond the treatment of individual ailments. Her knowledge embraced the interconnected health of human beings, nature, and the spiritual world. For her, medicine was not merely the curing of disease, but the restoration of harmony within the great living web of creation, where the well-being of humanity, the vitality of the natural world, and the wisdom of the divine were inseparably linked. Her vision of medicine was profoundly ecological, long before such ideas were commonly articulated. Hildegard understood that the health of a single human being could not be separated from the health of the wider world. In her view, the same life force that sustained the human body flowed through the soil, the forests, the rivers, and the air. When the natural world was respected and kept in harmony, human beings flourished. But when that harmony was disturbed through excess, neglect, or moral disorder, the consequences were felt not only in the environment, but also in the bodies and spirits of people. Thus, caring for nature was not merely practical, it was a sacred responsibility. Human wellness, she believed, depended on the wellness of all creation. Have you ever felt called to speak a truth that others did not want to hear? Hildegard knew that experience well. By the 1160s, she had established herself as one of the most respected spiritual authorities in Europe. Her writings circulated widely across monasteries and cathedral schools throughout Christendom. Scholars studied her visions, physicians consulted her medical texts, and ordinary people sought her guidance. Her treatments had restored the health of many patients, and her monastery had grown into a vibrant center of learning, creativity, and spiritual life, attracting students, pilgrims, and seekers of wisdom. Yet her greatest influence did not lie only in her scholarship or healing work. It emerged most powerfully through her role as a prophet, someone who spoke uncomfortable truths to those who held earthly power. Hildegard did not hesitate to address kings, bishops, abbots, and even emperors when she believed that their actions strayed from divine justice. Through letters, sermons, and public admonitions, she warned leaders about corruption, moral decay, and spiritual complacency. Her words were often bold, even confrontational, but they carried a force that few could easily dismiss. The foundation of Hildegard's prophetic authority was her unwavering conviction that she was not speaking her own ideas or opinions. She believed that the visions she received were direct communications from God, entrusted to her for the benefit of others. Because of this, she saw herself not as an ambitious critic of authority, but as a messenger obligated to deliver what had been revealed to her. This conviction gave her a remarkable confidence. It allowed her to speak across the rigid hierarchies of medieval society, addressing bishops, nobles, and rulers as moral equals, or even as one commissioned to correct them. This conviction gave her a remarkable confidence. It allowed her to speak across the rigid hierarchies of medieval society, addressing bishops, nobles, and rulers as moral equals, or even as one commissioned to correct them. In a world where women rarely possessed public authority, Hildegard's voice carried extraordinary weight. People listened not only because of her reputation for wisdom and healing, but because they sensed that her words came from a deeper source. Through her visions, her courage, and her relentless commitment to truth, she became a rare figure in medieval Europe, a woman whose spiritual authority transcended the boundaries of rank, gender, and power. She could address kings and emperors, bishops and popes, not as a supplicant seeking favor, but as a messenger entrusted with words she believed came from a higher authority. In her letters, she did not present herself as a political advisor or court counselor. Instead, she wrote as someone delivering divine warnings and guidance, messages she believed had been revealed to her through the living light that illuminated her visions. This conviction allowed her to speak with a boldness that was unusual for anyone in the hierarchical world of the 12th century, and even more extraordinary for a woman. Her extensive correspondence reveals the remarkable reach of her prophetic voice. Hildegard wrote to some of the most powerful figures in Europe, addressing their moral conduct, their leadership, and the spiritual consequences of their decisions. Among them was Emperor Frederick Barbarossa, whose struggles with the papacy had plunged the empire into conflict and division. In her letter to him, Hildegard warned that his defiance of spiritual authority endangered not only his own soul, but also the stability of the empire he ruled. She urged him to reconsider his course, reminding him that earthly power was temporary and that rulers would ultimately be judged by divine justice. She also wrote to King Henry II of England, advising him on the responsibilities of Christian kingship. Hildegard reminded the king that authority carried with it a sacred duty to protect the weak, uphold justice, and rule with humility before God. Political success, she warned, meant little if a ruler lost sight of the moral obligations entrusted to him. Even the papacy did not stand beyond her criticism. Hildegard addressed Pope Eugene III with a mixture of reverence and urgency, encouraging him to confront corruption within the clergy and restore discipline to the church. She believed that the moral health of the church depended on courageous leadership and spiritual integrity at its highest levels. In one letter to a ruler, she wrote with striking clarity,
"Listen, O king, and hear what the living light says to you through me. You must choose between the glory of this world and the glory of eternity."
These words captured the essence of her prophetic mission, to remind those who wielded power that their authority was fleeting and that their ultimate accountability lay before God. Her letters to church authorities could be even more direct and uncompromising. Hildegard openly condemned bishops who lived in comfort and luxury while the people under their care suffered poverty and neglect. She criticized monks who had abandoned the discipline and humility required by their vows, allowing complacency and indulgence to weaken the spiritual life of their communities. At times, she warned popes themselves that their hesitation to confront corruption within the church was allowing spiritual decay to spread. Yet, even when her words were severe, they were motivated not by anger or rebellion, but by a deep concern for the spiritual health of the church and society. Hildegard believed that silence in the face of wrongdoing was itself a form of betrayal. If God had entrusted her with visions meant to guide and correct, then she had a responsibility to speak them, no matter how uncomfortable the message might be for those who held power. Those who read her letters or heard her admonitions often discovered that events later developed in ways she had foreseen. She warned rulers about the consequences of their political decisions, predicted the outcomes of certain conflicts, and cautioned communities about dangers that might arise if moral and spiritual discipline were neglected. In some cases, she spoke of natural calamities, urging repentance and reform as a way of restoring harmony between humanity and the order of creation. Hildegard sometimes warned that particular leaders were drifting toward corruption or spiritual ruin long before their reputations collapsed publicly. Years later, when scandals or political disasters emerged, many remembered her earlier letters and began to regard her words with a mixture of awe and unease. Whether one interpreted these insights as divine revelation, sharp intuition, or moral clarity, they strengthened the perception that her voice carried unusual authority. Her most dramatic confrontation unfolded with Emperor Frederick Barbarossa, one of the most powerful rulers of the Holy Roman Empire. The emperor had become embroiled in a bitter struggle with the papacy, and during the conflict, he supported the installation of an anti-pope, an alternative claimant to the papal throne who stood in opposition to the recognized pope. This act deepened the divisions within the church and threatened to destabilize the religious and political order of Europe. Hildegard did not remain silent. In a letter addressed to the emperor, she spoke with striking boldness. She reminded him that earthly power did not grant immunity from divine judgment, and that rulers who pursued ambition at the expense of unity and justice endangered both their souls and their kingdoms. Her warning was uncompromising and direct.
Listen to what the living light says,
she wrote.
You are walking in the way of madness.
Such words were extraordinary in their context. Few individuals would have dared to address an emperor in such stark terms, especially a woman living within a monastic community. Yet Hildegard believed she had no choice. If the message came from God, then withholding it would have been a failure of her calling. Through moments like this, her reputation as a fearless prophet grew, someone willing to challenge the most powerful figures of her age in the name of truth she believed was greater than them all.
I am only a poor woman,
she began, her voice steady, despite the weight of the moment.
But I speak what the living light has shown me.
With these words, Hildegard often introduced her warnings, reminding those who listened that she did not claim wisdom from education, rank, or personal ambition. She presented herself simply as a vessel, someone through whom a greater voice was speaking. Then her message turned sharper, directed toward the spiritual condition of the church itself. The bride of Christ, she declared, has become soiled with earthly concerns. The phrase was deliberate and powerful. In Christian tradition, the church was often described as the bride of Christ, meant to be radiant with faith and devotion. Yet Hildegard believed that too many within its leadership had allowed worldly ambition to stain that purity.
Her priests,
she continued,
seek gold more eagerly than they seek souls. Her bishops build palaces rather than sanctuaries. They surround themselves with comfort, while the spirit entrusted to them grows weak.
Her criticism did not spare anyone who had forgotten the humility and discipline expected of spiritual leaders. To Hildegard, the danger was not only corruption, but complacency. The quiet acceptance of wealth, power, and privilege in a community meant to embody sacrifice and service. The cathedral fell silent as her words echoed through the vast space. Clergy, nobles, and townspeople alike felt the force of her rebuke. Many had grown accustomed to the gradual compromises that had crept into church life over the years. Luxuries justified, duties postponed, ideals quietly lowered. Hildegard's voice broke through that comfort with unsettling clarity. For a moment, no one spoke. The air seemed heavy with reflection and unease. Her message was not merely an accusation. It was a warning and a call to renewal. If the Church wished to remain the true bride of Christ, she insisted, it must cleanse itself of greed, pride, and indifference. Only through repentance and reform could it recover the spiritual radiance it had been meant to carry into the world. In Hildegard's view, true reform had to begin from within. She believed that church leaders must first return to humility, service, and integrity, becoming an example for the people they were meant to guide. If the clergy adopted lives that were simpler, more just, and closer to the ideals of the gospel, the light of faith would gradually be rekindled in the heart of society. For this reason, her words were not merely a rebuke. They were an attempt to awaken a conscience that had fallen asleep beneath layers of habit and power, an effort to help the Church return to its fundamental mission, guiding humanity toward truth and divine light. For Hildegard of Bingen, all her extraordinary abilities, her visions, her music, her writings, and her leadership were ultimately in service of a single unifying purpose, to reveal what she called the holy living light. She did not see her gifts as personal achievements, but as instruments through which divine truth could be made visible and tangible in the world. Through her words, her art, and her unwavering voice, she sought to awaken others to the presence of a living, intelligent order that permeates all creation. In this sense, her life's work was not merely creative or intellectual, but deeply spiritual, a mission to illuminate, to guide, and to affirm the existence of God through the harmony, beauty, and coherence she perceived in both the heavens and the human soul. And the gratitude she offers to God is the stage before and creation, the silent foundation from which every vision, every note, and every word emerges, an act not of self-expression, but of devotion, where creation itself becomes a form of prayer and a reflection of the divine light she was called to reveal.